Hey there! Welcome to the Flute 360 podcast. I'm Dr. Heidi Kay Begay, and I'm a flutist, educator, coach, and podcaster. My God-given mission is to serve you. I am passionate about guiding you, the modern-day flutist, to discover your unique voice on and off the stage. The goal of this podcast is to help you thrive, both as an artist and as a musicpreneur. Go ahead and grab your favorite hot tea, your notepad, and let's get to it. Today's episode is titled Episode 313, Unboxing Life's Lessons, from ASL to Flute and back again with Tyriibah Royal-Lampkins. Hey there, flute friend. You've invested so much in your craft, years of training, late night practice, and degrees that should mean something. But somehow it feels like those diplomas are collecting dust while your creative spark waits in the wings. That one dream job you envisioned for yourself, perhaps it didn't pan out. Okay, but this does not define your success. There are more opportunities out there for you. Join the Flute 360 Accelerator on Saturday, December 28th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time to rediscover your strengths, share your gifts, and create a fulfilling career. With 30 days of Boxer support, replays, and bonus materials, this is the fast track you've been looking for. Register for Tier 2 in the show notes today. Your future self will thank you. Hey, Tyriibah.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I can't wait to dive into today, and I can't wait for you to just dump amazing value into the 360ers' ears.
I can't wait either.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and just jump right into it because I have so many questions, and I know you talk about this topic quite a lot through your occupation, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time to unlock and uncover all of these golden nuggets.
I am ready.
Nice. So for you 360 listeners out there who is like, who's Tyriibah and what's this amazing topic all about? I will definitely, let's go ahead and have you, Tyriibah, introduce yourself first, because we have not done anything like this before on the show, bringing somebody in from another industry, talking about the parallels between your occupation and craft to the flute world. And being that you are a flutist and a American Sign Language interpreter, I want to make sure that you lay the groundwork very well with your background first and foremost, because I can easily see myself getting ahead of myself and asking all the questions and people going, whoa, wait, where are we? Who is Tyriibah? So if you want to start with that, that would be fantastic.
Sure. So my name is Tyriibah Royal-Lampkins. I am a nationally certified and Texas certified sign language to English interpreter. I have a associate's, bachelor's, and master's in sign language interpreting practice and research. And I am also the training and development manager for diversity, equity, and inclusion with Z and Purple Video Relay Service. And video relay service, for people who don't know, is how deaf and hard of hearing individuals that have video phones are able to get access to make phone calls. So when they make a call to someone that has a regular phone number through their video phone, an interpreter pops up on screen and interprets those phone calls using a headset so the deaf person can see them and the hearing person can hear them. So I help make trainings for the interpreters, and my role is helping make trainings and resources that are diversity, equity, and inclusion related for marginalized groups or underrepresented groups in our field. And with that, I have done a lot of research about imposter syndrome and horizontal or lateral violence in the field. But I think today we're focusing more on imposter syndrome. And I also play flute and am going back to flute after not playing for 12 years with the wonderful Dr. Heidi Kay Begay. And in our last lesson, we just got into a really in-depth and interesting conversation of how imposter syndrome and maybe a little vicarious trauma really manifests similarly from a sign language interpreter's perspective and a musician's perspective, because we are both producing art and or communication from directly from our bodies. And that is why we are here today.
Beautifully said. And thank you so much for your work. Thank you so much. And congratulations on your beautiful career and the impact that you have in your own community and beyond. It's amazing when I find people like you who are really thriving in your unique niche and industry, and you are making a difference. And so I recognize that. And I think that's so powerful.
Thank you. That means so much coming from you.
You're sweet. So, like you had said, you are returning back to the flute after 12 years. And the other reason I wanted you to lay out your background and your occupation so beautifully, like you just did, because then segue, the other layer to all of this is not just your beautiful work through ASL and the parallels between music making and interpretation and being an interpreter, but also the layer of friendship, but the history that we have between you and me, which is really cool because there's so many like full circle moments here, and I'm all for it. So Tyriibah was a music student of mine back in 2012 when I was an adjunct music instructor at Tarrant County College in downtown Fort Worth, Texas, 12 years ago. And air quote, out of the blue, she texted me and she's like, "Hey, Heidi, girl, I'm going back to Flute. I want to take from you. Where are you in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex? And wherever you are, I'll go and get lessons with you. No problem. I just hope to God we're both like in the Dallas area." And I was like, "Well, where are you?" And she's like, "I'm in Forney." I'm like, "Shut up. I'm in Forney, Texas too." So the reason why I want you, the listener, to know this is because like those connections, those relationships that you make with prior students, colleagues, peers, friends, they have such an impact in people's lives in different ways. And so for Tyriibah, I feel so humbled and just blown away that Tyriibah, one, remembered me after 12 years, but two, for her to say, "Hey, I want to go back to Flute. Can you help me?" And we ended up being in the same town after all this time. To me, it's more than serendipitous. It's almost like divine intervention. And so that's my encouragement from me to you, the listener. Like, you just never know. If you want to pick up something new, if you want to pick somebody's brain, if you want to reconnect with somebody in tremendous ways, do it, because it really is just a text message. So before we get into the imposter syndrome stuff, that in of itself, Tyriibah, I think is a huge nugget for people. Can you tell them like what was going through your mind? Because like returning to your flute after 12 years, a lot of people shy away from that because they think like, "Oh, I'm going to sound like a beginner again. And is it going to be like riding a bicycle?" So can you talk us through why you decided to return back to the instrument, and what was the drive? What was your passion? And then what made you take it one step further and say, "I need some help. I need some guidance. I'm going to reach out to that crazy lady in Fort Worth from 12 years ago."
Absolutely. I think it was really a season of change for me. I had recently gotten married and we just bought our first house, and never owning a house before, there's a lot of home ownership, just things that I had no idea about. And it was just a lot of change where I didn't feel balanced. And I felt in that not being balanced, I needed something that was for me and solely for me and no one else. And after unpacking, because you know it takes forever to unpack all your boxes when you move into a house. After unpacking, I was like, "Oh, there's my flute. First flute, only flute I've ever owned. My parents bought it for me. I missed it. And my father-in-law just loves live music, loves jazz, and has been taking me to jazz concerts really often for the last maybe 6 years. And I just was like, I love music. I love live music. He makes sure to take me to see jazz flute players, and it was just inspiring. And I decided, this is something that is going to be for me. And I remember the last time I played the flute, I was in a music theory class, not even for flute specifically. And I remember this nice woman who was my professor and that was teaching. And like, I was somewhat of a shy person. And I remember we had this project where I think it was our final, where we had to like compose nothing super serious. And hey, this wonderful professor said, hey, if you play it, I'll give you extra credit. And I told the professor is Dr. Heidi Kay Begay, if y'all didn't know. But I told you that I played the flute, and you just were always so encouraging. So outside of school, remembering that encouragement was still in abundance outside of school, me driving an hour to an hour and a half to your house and doing private lessons, just thought like, man, I have Heidi's phone number and I have her on Facebook. Let me try to reach out, because this is something that I need to do for myself. I need more balance. This is a self-care thing that is solely for me. And there's no pressure to it. I'm not in school. I don't have to do it because it's not a have to, it's a want to. So I reached out to you, and I remember telling you, like, I'm new to the area. This is something I want to do for me, but I also want a community. I don't have friends in the area. Like, this is something I want, and was totally willing to drive 2 hours if I needed to for a lesson. And the fact that we lived at the most 10 minutes from each other, it was just, I feel like it was meant to be. So that's kind of what really just led me to where I am now as far as my flute journey is. That's how I got here. And I am learning a lot of stuff that I just didn't learn back when I was playing every single day, because I was in high school and partly in college, and I had directors and stuff that were not flute players. And that makes a huge difference. And I did not realize how much of a difference it meant until I started working with you again 12 years later. And it just brings me so much joy, because it's for me and it's with you, and it's great.
It brings me a lot of joy too. And you are such a blessing in my life. And what I love from that story and from that testimony is just literally envisioning you unpacking your physical boxes. And there's the flute, like just the tickle me moment of, oh my gosh, there's my instrument. And I loved playing it. And I want to come back to it. And I want to return to this joy. Good for you. And literally, not to sound cheesy, and I really don't mean it cheesy this way at all, but literally, like spiritually, metaphorically, and physically, you got to unpack that part of your life from the physical boxes, but also from like this need of unpacking something and claiming a piece of yourself and coming back to it again and getting to unpack like, hey, like you said, I'm a new first time home owner. There's a lot there. I'm newly married. I'm in my career. I need something for me. So there was a lot of things that you were unpacking in your life, and you got to unpack your flute and how it all comes together. It's really magical. I love that. And I love how, just then full circle from my perspective, you teachers out there, you have such an impact with your students. And the fact that I get to see Tyriibah, when she was 20 years old, 12 years ago, and now in her 30s, not married, running from school to school and doing homework 12 years ago, to now thriving in her own career. I get to see Tyriibah like back then, younger Tyriibah, and then now current Tyriibah really thriving in both capacities, but in different ways, in different parts of your life. And us teachers, sometimes we only get to see like a sliver of the life, like, for example, high school or college. and then they go off, and we may not ever see that pupil ever again. And the fact that when I have students come back and return like you did, it brings so much joy, because it's like, this is why I love making an impact in people's lives, because of those relationships. And if you get to come back 12 years later or however long, then it's like, oh my gosh, then that's when I get the goosebumps and the pinch me moments of going, yay, I get to see Tyriibah again. And I love that, going down memory lane of your composition. I totally forgot about that. And I'm so glad you reminded me. I'll have to dig through my old TCC paperwork and go, where's Tyriibah's composition? Because I keep everything. And so anyways, all that's to say is just look at the impact that you can have as an educator. And now, like when I was adjunct at TCC and now we're working together one-on-one, they're in different capacities, but we get to be in each other's lives yet again. And now you're my friend. And now I get to learn from you. And when we unpack things in flute lessons, you go, oh yeah, very similar to ASL. Oh yeah, very similar to when I am training the new interpreters. Oh yeah. And it's like, so cool. And I get to learn from you, and the ripple effect is huge. So anyways, all that's to say is I had to get giddy and just be in that moment in that zone with you for a hot second, because it's really special to me. And for me to be able to be in this space with you for a hot second means the world to me. So moving into the lessons that you and I get to unpack in flute lessons, there was many, many times, but I will pick one specific time where you were leaving a lesson and you dropped this gem, and it blew my mind. It blew my mind so much that I had to give you a hug. I was like, oh my gosh, I never made that connection before. And I'm so appreciative that you laid it out for me in a beautiful way. And that was, you were talking about the connection of how ASL interpreters feel to their craft of using their hands, using their facial expressions, using their bodies to interpret said text to the person, in the space. And how sometimes, because they're using so much of their body, that they can't, and correct me if I'm wrong, they can easily intertwine their own self into their craft. So when they get some objective feedback on how they can interpret better, they see it as this personal attack. And they have a hard time separating the art from the person. And the aha moment was that easily could be what's happening with musicians. So can you break that down a little bit more? I just kind of laid the land of what's going on, but can you break that down a little bit more? Because there's a lot of layers here, and I'm so excited to get into that with you.
I think that you put it beautifully. We, as interpreters, like you said, we are doing this mental gymnastics of taking a linear language, English, and putting it into a visual language where not everyone's interpretation is going to be exactly the same, although it may be accurate. But we're doing role shifting to show the different people saying something. We are putting this into sign language, but saying it as in first person. All of this is coming off of our bodies. It's coming out of our minds. It's coming off of our hands. And when we get critique to get better, we often can feel that, oh, it's me. I'm not doing this. This was not correct. This was wrong. This was me. And something that I have been practicing is taking the I out of it and saying, okay, so the part of this interpretation could have been better by doing da, da, da. So I have been working on making sure that I am talking about the art, the work, and not myself when critiquing. And that is a coping, and hopefully I'm not jumping, but that is a coping strategy for when you are feeling what a lot of people may hear as imposter syndrome, because it is really difficult to not take on these critiques as something that's wrong with us, the person, because we are literally using our bodies to make this product. Same with musicians, the way that you take your breaths, how long you can hold your notes, the different dynamics in the music that you are able to play, and whether you execute them well, or you may need a little bit more practice, or you are producing this art with your breath, your brain, your hands, all of that. And so when it is easy for us to take on critique as a critique of self, when it's really just a critique of the work. And that is where interpreting and being a musician kind of align, when we are just trying to improve. And the imposter syndrome part of it is you've done all this work to get where you are, and you've earned the place that you are at, but you're being so hard on yourself. You're not looking at all the accomplishments that got you there. You have everything that proves that you deserve to be where you are, but you're not listening to it. And that's when you feel like an imposter. And that's because you are critiquing the self and not the product that you are making.
Boom, bam. Yes. Oh my
That made
goodness.
sense.
Yeah, no, it was perfect. So I hear a lot of different things in there, and I'm going to do my best to pull out these different gems so we can unpack them a little bit more. Unpack. That's going to be our theme for today.
Yes.
That will be the title. Unpacking. I'll have to think of something creative. Unpacking self, unpacking flute, unpacking self-worth with Tyriibah. Something like that.
I'll think on it too.
Yeah. I love
Put
it.
our brains together.
Yeah, I love that. So the one reason why I gave you a massive hug at the front door, and I was like, oh my gosh, yes, is because I don't know if you know this, but in the music industry, a lot of flutists, we self-identify and we identify with the flute. I am a flute, not even like I'm a flutist, but like flute is me. And being, this kind of objective person in the flute world, I'm not as artsy. Like my brain, it doesn't light up with all the different colors that I know my colleagues can see. I think because like I'm more analytical, that's why like music business and topics like that resonate with me. And that's how my brain works. And I never understood why flutists responded and resonated and literally said, I am flute. All these years, I never understood that. And in my mind, there's probably various reasons for each individual why they say, I am flute. Flute is me, right? And everybody has a different experience, background, etc. But the only conclusion that I ever came up with was because these flutists are literally investing so much time, money, degrees into this instrument, they can't see themselves anything but flute, which is totally valid, completely valid. But the way you said it, with using you as a musician, you are using your air, you are using your fingers, you are using your heart, you are using your body, your mind. And I think you said earlier something along the lines of shape shifting. And I thought of like a flutist going between a Baroque piece and a modern piece and a piece written by a male, a piece written by a female, and we have to shape shift. There's so much of us, the individual, that is going into the actual physical instrument. That instrument cannot sing without my air. And that is me. That is so personal because I would not be me without oxygen, without air. And so that aha moment for me at the door was like, oh my gosh, this could be why flutists literally state, I am flute, I am a flutist. And when that, instrument for some reason in their particular season is taken away from them, whether it's a performance related injury, a career shift, there's almost this breakdown. And it's almost this very depressing season that they go through. And it's because it very well could be, they see themselves so much a part of the instrument that now if that entity is taken away from them, they don't know what to do. And for me, it was this aha in the sense of like, oh my gosh, it's this emotional connection to the instrument that somebody could have with the flute. The way you were describing it with breath, fingers, and it was just like this like moment for me of going, oh, maybe it's more than just the investment and the time of the practicing. In of itself, that's valid alone. But now we have a human being bringing this metal tube to life. And that's why we have a really hard time disassociating ourselves with objective feedback or criticism, or, the career didn't work out the way we thought because, air quote, we are flute. I am flute. I am a flutist. So much of our embodiment is entangled into that instrument.
Yeah. I remember when I did my internship for interpreting after my master's degree. We were required to do an internship to get our degrees. And I got some feedback and was just tearing myself apart to the point where I was in tears. And my mentor that I went to that assignment with to interpret, we met up later and she was like, "How did you feel after my feedback?" And I told her, like, it tore me up. Like I was bawling. And she said, "Why?" And I said, because you said I did bad." And she's like, "I didn't say that. I gave you critique on the work that you did." And she asked me, she said, "What are you outside of an interpreter?" I was like, "That, I don't know. I don't know what you mean. What are you outside of an interpreter? Are you, you're a daughter, you're a sister? Like, do you paint? Like, what are your identities outside of an interpreter?" So I guess I challenge flute players or even musicians, like, what is your identity outside of a flutist? So that you do not put all of your energy or thoughts into the critiques that you get to where it is disheartening, or you really just start say, "All I want to do is sign language to you, Heidi," when I can't think of the English word. um, but when you are getting these critiques and things, it's helpful to remember that the critique is not about you. It's about what you're doing. And remember that you are not just a flutist. And I think that is something that I have practiced for a long time is I am not just an interpreter. And I have to remember, as I am getting back into music and playing the flute, I am not just a flutist, and this is a journey. And I have to remember my roles and my identities outside of this one thing that I am doing for right now, so that I don't tear myself down and I'm able to pick things back up and keep going. So,
Guys, I didn't even pay Tyriibah to say any of that. And I say that, and I preface that, Tyriibah, because you're new to, my world again and picking up Flute 360 and realizing that there's a podcast out there for flutists. But that's one of my soapboxes. Is what are your other identifiers? What are your other identities? Because if flute has to be put on pause, right? Or, the job isn't coming for flute, or you're doing a lot of competitions where you're getting a lot of feedback through these high pressured, performances and situations, it could feel like, oh my gosh, because that flute identity is so strong and there's not any other labels, any other identifiers to ground yourself, to make yourself feel whole as a person, you can beat yourself up a little bit too much where it's almost unhealthy. And so that was my biggest aha for me in my career when the flute professor job didn't come after the doctorate. In my brain for so long, when I said at 13, I want to be Dr. Heidi. And then at 33, I was Dr. Heidi, and that flute professor job did not come. My moment of aha was, why is this so hard for me? And it was because for 20 years, I said in my head, I will be a flute professor. I am a flute professor. For 20 years, that was my DNA. And when that job didn't come, I literally was so depressed. I was just like, what is wrong? Why can't I shake this off? And it was because my identity was so enthralled with that professional title, I couldn't see anything else. My blinders were so strict on that one thing. And literally one day when I was practicing in a Fort Worth apartment before we moved into this Forney house, God literally put on my heart, you are my daughter. You are a wife. You are, and he started listing off all the things that I am outside of being a flute professor. And I bawled, girl. I was just like, oh my gosh, he's right. I mistakenly, and that was my bad, I mistakenly forgot who I was in Christ. I forgot who I was, built to be, and in all these other capacities and wearing all of these different hats. outside of flute. And so that's why I think, like, for me at least, it was so freeing and so gratifying to go, I am, and list off all the other things that I am and that I love to do and that I'm passionate about outside of flute, because then I felt whole as a person. And just on the off chance, if flute was taken out from my hands today, would I be okay? Yes, I would be completely fine. It would be a little heartbreaking, but I would be completely fine now. And I had to come to terms with that back in like 2020. And so all that's to say is it's just a piece of encouragement for y'all and a piece of empowerment for y'all that you are a son or a daughter, a wife, a spouse, an uncle, an auntie, a grandma, a grandpa, an author. You know, what other things are you passionate about? Artist, gardening, athlete, you know, list them all off.
Crocheting, knitting.
A lot of my Flute 360ers are crocheters, Tyriibah. You crochet, right?
I do. Look, all the yarn.
Oh my God. Oh yes.
So much. I have so much yarn.
All the different colors. I love it. I'll have to show you when you come to lessons tomorrow in our guest bedroom. My friend Taylor, who's a flutist and a crocheter, he crocheted Flute 360's logo on a wall art. I know.
Okay. You definitely have to show me tomorrow. So I want to see it.
Yeah, I cannot for the life of me figure out how he made the numbers like an actual 3, because it bubbles. Like, how do you get the yarn? Like, I understand straight lines, but like a circle pattern, just the actual logo circle, and then the number is 360.
I might be able to tell you after I see it.
Okay, because it blows my mind. Like the F in flute, that makes sense. We got 3 lines there. L, okay. But like the actual numbers and how they curve, talk about mind blowing. And it's so beautiful. You're going to be blown away. But
I'm sure.
I'm a crocheter. I'm a sewer. All these different things. And so anyways, let's go back to another nugget you said, and you can unpack it a little bit more. And that is, you said you are very diligent and you're very intentional with how you phrase critique. So you said something earlier about like removing the word I. Is that correct? Yes. Can you go back to that?
Yes. So removing the word I is one of the ways that I try to ground myself, like you said, which I love saying it that way. Try to ground myself, not saying like I missed the 8th note in that measure, or I held that rest for way too long, or man, I cannot get those dotted quarter notes to save my life. But more so, okay, so the 8th note was missed. The rest was held for way too long. And practicing speaking about the work that way has helped me. So when I am interpreting and I think, okay, this concept was not clear because I didn't set up the scene well in space. Oh, I said okay, this concept could have been more clear because the scene was not set up. Next time we need to set things up in space better. So just practicing not saying I, and is a good way that I have found, an effective way for me to ground myself and be better at not tearing myself down with critique.
That right there, girl, I kid you not. It's such a subtle shift, but it has such a huge impact. Like my brain is just blown. Like I keep saying that throughout this entire hour, but it really is. My brain is so blown and that's why I think even this conversation is getting me excited as being a podcast host for 360, of pulling like what you're doing in this conversation for me, Tyriibah, is I'm inspired now to bring more people outside of and from other industries into our music world, because I think flutists, we start talking and reflecting back language that's very similar because of our training, because of our family flute tree. Certain language and patterns get passed down and we start kind of replicating that. But you just saying like the note was missed, not I missed the note, but the note was missed. Like I've never heard somebody And I've studied with a lot of people, and I've been across the world for flute and concerts my whole life. I've never heard a musician say, oh, the note was cracked. I cracked the note. But and it sounds so like blatantly like you may be thinking you're not because you're so sweet, but somebody hearing this could be like, Heidi, like that's so obvious. Like, come on, like doink. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But like, it's such a huge shift, and it takes away, like it separates now the human being from the art that they are creating. And so it could be so empowering. Do you know what I mean? It can be so empowering to go, that note was cracked. And now you can almost kind of fluff it off and not absorb it into you and going, shame on you, Heidi, you cracked that note. But more or less like the note was cracked. It's outside of me. Oh, kind of a little bit out of my control. Like I know it's like in your control in the sense of like, now you know like air direction and how much air to use next time, etc. But like now it feels separated from me. Now it's like the note, silly note, that note cracked. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think it's okay to, and it's not like pushing off accountability or anything like that. But if you are in a place where you are really just not being kind to yourself, because first of all, being a musician is just like an interpreter is a practice profession. It is something that you have to continue working at, or your skills are going to decrease. It's a practice profession. You have to keep working at it.
Yeah.
So that means that there's never a point that you are going to just arrive and be amazing all the time. There isn't. And if you get to that point in life where you're like, I've arrived and I don't need to practice or look at my work, and then you're in the wrong profession. You have to keep at it. You have to keep practicing. And in staying healthy while practicing, separate yourself from the work that you're doing when you are doing critiques. And maybe once you get to a place, you can put yourself back in there when you're talking about the solution for the critique.
Okay.
So, that note cracked. I need to blow more air.
I see. Or
you
less
can
air.
do it that way, depending on where you are at in your journey and what coping strategies you want to use and that are effective for you. You can start with separating and using yourself as the solution, saying I for how do I make that better or solve that issue.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that was much needed. Yeah. I love that. And let's take a quick break. I've got a question for you. Where do you go to sharpen your playing now that school is behind you? And who is supporting your career dreams? The Flute 360 Accelerator is more than just career support. It's a space where we come together, share beautiful music, and keep growing as artists and professionals. Our next live session is on Saturday, December 28th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time, where we'll work on your flute skills and your career path. You'll also get 30 days of Voxer support, replays, and bonus materials to keep the momentum going. Click the link in the show notes to register for Tier 2. Let's do this together. I know that this is a very blanketed question, but you and I are on the same page, and you kind of, I think, get inside my head a little too well. You're so good at what you do. So I hope you know what I'm talking about when I ask you this question. Are there any other coping mechanisms, anything else when you're training other ASL interpreters to, in the sense of separating self from work? Or is there another tendency that you see interpreters or yourself fall into that could be a parallel to musicians and their world? Another sort of thing like you did just now with removing the word I cracked the note versus the note was cracked. Now I get to blow less air. Any other strategies, any other techniques that you see in your ASL world that will help musicians?
Well, one thing that I often tell trainees or new interpreters is to, besides talking about the work and not about the person, record yourself. Record yourself, listen to it, get someone else to listen to it, and see if your critiques match the critiques of the other person, because you become more self-aware and you're able to monitor while you're doing the work. I hope this doesn't sound too broad. But
No.
both in interpreting, most interpreters are doing what is called simultaneous interpreting. And that's when, if you've ever seen an interpreter work, they are listening to the English and putting it out into sign language at the same time that they're hearing it. That is very complex and hard to do. When you see your work more often and you analyze your own work and get someone else to see it and they do their analysis and you compare, it teaches you to pick out these things outside of the moment, and therefore helps you learn to separate a little bit more. And it helps you learn to self-monitor while it's happening and figure out how to repair while it's happening. I'll talk about myself. I've experienced playing and messing up right there and just stopping and wanting to just start over immediately, when if I'm doing a performance, I can't do that. I can't just stop, or I can't just start over. I have to be self-aware, and what maybe it got me off count. So I have to figure out in my brain, okay, what count are we on? What measure are we at? I need to pick up and keep going. So the more I know the critiques in my work, the more I listen and practice and get more self-aware, the easier I am able to repair things more quickly. And I think that is something that I tell new interpreters a lot, that I think would be beneficial for musicians as well. I think just playing is not enough. Just practicing is not enough, but record yourself and listen to it again. Get the wonderful Dr. Heidi Begay to listen to your recording and give you feedback. So I would say that's one thing.
Yeah. Boom, bam, yet again, you nailed it.
Yes.
And again, I did not pay Tyriibah to say that. Literally, one of the things that I do at the end of every guest interview is picks. What are your picks for today? What is your mantra? What is the thing that you want to share with your people, etc.? And a lot of flute professors who come on the show, they will say, record yourself, record. And that's their go-to tip every single time. That tip for the day is literally, and the pick for the day is literally that sentiment right there. And the way you broke it down and the reasons why we want to record and to encourage flutists to record, again, was just so eloquently spoken. So thank you so much for that.
Yay.
Your trainees and the people you manage are so blessed to have you as a mentor. Oh my gosh.
Aww, thanks.
Yeah. Just how you articulate things and your big heart and your personality, like they are so blessed beyond measure to have you in their lives. And I really mean that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
From you.
So as I was coming into today's conversation, when you said just now, you said it is a lot to take in what's happening through English that's being processed and verbalized out into the open, and you are simultaneously, as that's happening, that is a lot. And that reminded me of this thing I was thinking about coming into the call, and I wanted to ask you, have you ever interpreted live music? And if so, is that like a whole nother level of difficulty?
So I have interpreted live music, not instrumental.
Okay.
But like vocal.
Lyrics.
Yes, that is the word. Lyrics. It is a different layer. And in most situations, there's time to practice or, have these words, these lyrics on paper and kind of break them up and figure out what's the most accurate way to interpret the meaning. And with sign language or American Sign Language, the sentence structure is not the same as English.
Okay.
At all. So if I say, I'm going to go to the store on Tuesday, if someone says that sentence, in sign language, the time or day has to come first.
Okay.
And the object has to come before what happens to the object. So I'm going to go to the store on Tuesday. Tuesday, store, I go.
I see.
Is a way that would be signed. So hearing that sentence and all the sentences after it and having to sign it in the way that I just told you it was restructured, and there's more words coming and coming, that is complex in itself. With lyrics, there is a lot of imagery that happens in the songs. There's a lot of figurative language that happens in the songs. And with figurative language, okay, do I sign what they're saying or do I sign what they mean?
Interesting.
And you have to make that decision because not everything translates equivalently from English into sign language. There can be one sign for 100 English words, or there can be no sign for this English word. So an interpreter will have to expand by giving examples of the thing, or expand by acting it out.
Okay.
Expand by role shifting, expand by showing dialogue between people. So if you could imagine figurative language, that's an example of when there's more things that there isn't a sign for.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens a lot in music. So it's complex.
That's amazing. I never thought of all of that. I was thinking the complexity of just like the rhythm and flow and beat to the music and showcasing that. I would think through your body language and actually moving to the beat and showcasing that
part,
element.
The best part, the easiest part.
Getting to like move your hips and yeah. Is that fun? Is that fun to like interpret all of that you just said, language, the structure, figurative speech, things like that, but then the actual movement to music and like the style of the music through the interpretation and your body?
I think it is fun. The complex part that I explained before, especially the figurative language piece, is the reason why I am not fond of interpreting a lot of music.
Okay.
But there are people out there that absolutely love it, and that is their thing. That is their niche. That is what they want to do solely as interpreting, is like plays and Broadway performances or concerts. That is their lane, and they love it.
Okay.
And I never see an issue with them feeling that music, because once you have all the complex part down, you get to enjoy the music and you get to move to all of the beats and not, I don't know, I feel like that's the freeing part of it. It's like, okay, I've done all the work to figure out what's the best way to interpret this to where it's accurate and it's understandable. Now I get to have fun with it. So similar to playing your instrument and learning a piece and practicing a piece again and again. Okay, I got it. Now I get to add all the color and the nuances and add the extra dynamics to the episodes of the piece. And yeah, so
put my personality into the interpretation and bring it to life. Yes. I think as classically trained flutists, we forget that aspect right there. It's the notes, it's the rhythm, it's the ensemble, it's the accuracy, it's the air quote perfectionism. I got to get this right. And then we're going to sprinkle in, like, maybe if I just maybe remember some Heidiness, some Britneyness, do you know what I mean? And it's like, I think it needs to be reversed. I think that we need to have that Heidiness, Britneyness, playerness, interpretation, style, vibe, energy from the get-go of learning a piece. Because now it's embedded in the notes as you're learning the technique, the intonation, the tone, the structure of the musical form, the musical piece. Because if we add it in later, then it's like, I don't know, it's not the entity, the energy, it's not the same. Like to be learning this technique on my page, the black and white, while I'm putting my heart and soul into it during these formative times as I'm breaking down the piece, technically throw that spirit, energy, character into it from the get-go, because then it's going to make all of that more fun. And I think it actually propels the learning of the technique to a whole different level, because now it's not just the black and white and, oh my gosh, this feels like this dreariness.
It's not enjoyable.
Right. Yeah. So I think it actually, like that vibe and the energy of the air and that Heidiness or whatever in those formative times of learning the technique, it actually helps the fingers, it helps the air, it helps everything come together. But anyways, so as we wrap up, before we get to picks, do you have any last sentiments for flutists out there? Something that we didn't cover that you wished we would have covered, or something that you wished you would have articulated through our conversation that we just didn't get to?
One thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was something called transition shock.
Okay.
You may have, everyone probably has heard of the term of like culture shock.
Okay.
And transition shock is something that I'm kind of experiencing now as someone who has been away from the flute for 12 years and coming back. So with my trainees and the new interpreters, a lot of them are students and stuff where they have been doing their interpreting studies for a grade with a cohort, having to meet this certain expectation and hit this certain mark, pass a class. And once they graduate, they're into the field as a professional, and there is the transition shock. It's different. It works different. You are responsible for your own progress in a different way. So comparing that to what I am going through now is the transition shock of, I'm not getting a grade for this. And I think that evokes a little fear for me because, oh man, I'm not getting a grade for it. What if I'm not going to practice as much? Oh man, I'm not getting a grade for it. What if I'm not going to get good? What if so all these what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. So the transition shock for me is going from, learned through high school where I had to practice every day because I was doing all city or all region or all district. I had to practice every day because I was getting a grade. I had to practice every day marching and stuff like that. These expectations were there that made sure that I got progress. Also, I was learning from people who were not flute players.
Okay.
And now I am learning from someone who is a flute player and a professional flute player, and going through transition shock of those things. So I guess I say that to just be kind to yourself if you are going through any transition shock. If you are experiencing a transition in your flute playing or flute environment, meaning even the people that are involved in your flute journey, just be patient with yourself and give yourself some grace. Take some time to write down your identities outside of playing the flute. If you can, don't put down that you're a mom, a daughter, a sister, but put down things that are just for you. And I really think that that'll help you feel more grounded and balanced. That's it.
Oh my gosh. I won't do this to y'all. I swear I won't. But with Tyriibah being episode 313 that comes out next Tuesday, I am almost like tempted to like end Flute 360 and stop all interviews forevermore, because literally I could put a period on this entire podcast and this entire podcasting journey with this conversation. Like, I've done my work. Tyriibah was the period to everything. And we said what we needed to say. And now we get to move on to the next project. That's how impactful your words are, girl. Like, that's literally another like third, fourth soapbox that I talk about through the podcast all the time. But the way that you are shaping your words, the way that you are articulating your ideas in a different way, I just know that there's going to be a listener. You know how like a certain nugget and a certain lesson can be said among 4 different teachers, but each teacher is going to describe it and break it down uniquely in their own way. But it's, you know, and the student will hear teacher 1, 2, 3 say it. And they're like, yeah, I've heard that before. And the words, not just yet, they don't quite penetrate their mind just yet where they can make those connections. And then the 4th teacher comes along. It's the same thing, but the same lesson that these people are trying to, you know, implement and help said student. But the way she or he says it right off the bat, it's like, oh, and then the stars align and everything's there. That's you. That right there. I'm sure there's listeners out there who are going to be like, oh my gosh, Heidi has said this a million times. But when Tyriibah came around, it was like fireworks. Oh, I love it. Yes, 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 and yes. So without further ado, let's wrap up this beautiful, wonderful conversation with picks. Now, picks is something like What is your, the pick of the day? So it can be something musical, non-musical, something ASL, something not ASL. It could be your favorite serial, movie, book, comic strip, whatever is in your world right now that you want people to like check out. That's your pick.
That I want people to check out.
Something you just love.
I would say, I wish I had like something specific, but I would say either check out learning a new signed word a day, a new sign for sign language a day, whether it's music. So, like, this is the sign for music. So, like, try to just pick a word every day to learn the sign to. Watch a video or YouTube deaf culture and learn about deaf culture. We have so many deaf people in the world that have to fight for their access. And I think, if you pick a word a day, that's 365 words at the end of the year that you'll know. So I would say that's it. This is access, and there's so many things as hearing people that we take for granted, that we get access to so easily. So just not trying to like put in a plug or anything like that, you guys, but yeah, just a word a day, or look up a deaf culture video and see what you learn.
Oh, I love that. And when Tyriibah was doing the sign for music, because this is audio based, she had her one hand out. Can you describe like what it looks like?
Your non-dominant hand is going to be in neutral space in front of your body, and your palm is going to be face up and open. Your dominant hand is going to be, this is a little difficult. It is going to move forward and towards your body, hovering about an inch or two above your palm, your your non-dominant palm, swaying back and forth. So that's the best way I can describe it. You can also use that word and look it up on YouTube
there you
Google to see if my description makes sense. But yes, that is music.
Yeah, her dominant hand looks like conducting in a way, but with a more open palm. And it's this swaying motion. It's very free. And just even the way she's swaying her body with her hand, it looks like music. I love that. Thank you for teaching me that.
You're so welcome.
Yeah. And this is the last layer to this. That's why I was like, oh my gosh, which direction? How are we going to start out this conversation? Because there's like 4 or 5 main layers to everything we talked about and who we are. Another full circle moment for me is when I help flutists with their music business, their flute studios, I get to come over here and say, how you are a unique individual, how you can serve the community and get paid to do what you're passionate about and what you're good at. You're solving their problems. I tell them all the time, your clients are going to look like you. So full circle, I don't know, I have never mentioned this in 320 episodes, but I share this with Tyriibah. I never share this with my listeners. And that is when I was in junior high school and high school, I was part of the ASL club. I learned American Sign Language when I was like a little girl, like from 10 to 15 years old. And that's a part of me that I'm really proud of. And I had amazing deaf friends, hearing impaired friends, and their names, 2 friends come to mind. I still remember their names from 30 years ago, and that is Michael and Jessica. And I got to sign with them at lunch and after school and before school, and I would go and learn, ASL with them. And so I say all that because full circle, share your stories, share these different parts of you outside of flute, because then your clients who are looking for your flute services, teaching, performing, whatever, they are going to resonate with that aspect of you and from your life. And so when Tyriibah came back into my world and she's like, I am a certified ASL interpreter, I was like, shut up. And so your clients embody and they reflect portions of you. You're not going to be identical twins. Nobody can be, but portions of you in your life and who you are, that story, that background, those perspectives are attracted to one another. And so I can't make this stuff up. Do you know what I mean? And so that's what that in of itself, we could talk about that in its own episode. Your shape-shifting and the imposter syndrome, that's an episode in of itself. So we're going to have like Tyriibah and Heidi hour every Thursday for the next year to unpack all of this stuff. Do you see what I'm saying? Isn't that amazing? And like literally the flute professor, you don't know this, Tyriibah, but the flute professor who helped me get into my DMA, I was in between seasons. I was in a transition. I was teaching when I was teaching you in 2012. I literally 2 years later in 2014 studied with Don Bailey in Dallas to help me get accepted into doctoral programs. And so full circle, when I was teaching you and other students during that time, I had a hefty teaching load of teaching anywhere between 60 to 80 students for 6 years. Like it was a lot. And I loved every minute of it. But my playing and me practicing and coming to the flute for my own improvement was very minimal. Like I didn't have a lot of practice time.
Something went wrong. Please try again.
Okay. Thank you, Siri. She said, something is wrong. Please try again. Yeah, something's wrong. You're talking. So, but literally, so for me to find time to get back into auditions, I hired somebody to help me up the ante. Don Bailey, he was, I don't know if he still is. I don't want to misquote, but he was an ASL. I don't know if he was a full out interpreter, but he was also in the ASL community as well.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, there's a million flute teachers out there, but who do you resonate with? Who do you gravitate towards in these different ways? Because like these themes and these parallels of like these connecting stories and things like that, that client is looking for somebody in their professional teacher, in their coach, whatever role you're in, they're looking for somebody who gets them. And so I just wanted to share that because like you can't make this stuff up.
I love it. I'm so happy that we like got brought back together, and after 12 years and just looking back, and 12 years ago, I was this 20-year-old that was just trying to navigate life and go to school and figure out what I wanted to do. And
now we get to talk about husbands and family and
family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. It is so amazing. Well, thank you so much for your expertise, your energy, and your time, your generosity. I learned a lot, and I know that the 360 listeners have learned a lot as well. And so if somebody wanted to reach out to you for further questions, what's the best method?
Probably email.
I will go ahead and put Tyriibah's email in the show notes below, so you can click it and send her a message. She is so open and warm and giving, so she doesn't bite. You can reach out to her and go, hey, I have a follow-up question, and she would be more than happy to do that.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks, girl. And I will see you tomorrow. And I'm just going to be on this giddy high for the rest of the day. So thank you for that. And on this Tuesday morning.
You're welcome. Same here. This is great.
Before you go, think about this. When was the last time you felt truly inspired by your playing and your career? Your degrees and talent are not just memories. They're tools waiting to be used. The Flute 360 Accelerator is here to help you rediscover your passion, sharpen your flute skills, and build a career that feels right for you. Join us on Saturday, December 28th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time, and let's create something beautiful together. With 30 days of Voxer support, replays, and bonus materials, you'll have everything you need to succeed. Click the link in the show notes to join Tier 2 today. Your future self will thank you. Let's talk about flute.